I think we're gonna start off just by talk about today's count, which some of you might have seen already. Um, Three levels continue to be very high. We started very late in the season, but the last week or so, with the temperatures going up, we've seen some very large increases in tree pollen count. Uh, we started with elms, and then we start seeing some maple. Cottonwood has been very high in the last few days. Um, we also seeing some grass. I wouldn't say that we started the grass season already, but it's possibly some grass carried from the southern parts of the state. But we should start seeing some grass maybe within the next 2 weeks or so. Weeds, I don't expect to see any, at least this time of year here. We probably start seeing those in July, August, of course, and the fall time frame. Molds have been a little unusual this year as well. Um, Only recently we're starting seeing some pickup in mold. I think it's also temperature related. We've had some cold weather early on, but it certainly is also on the rise with the increased humidity and the increased temperature we've seen lately. So I wanted to share with you today some of what I do to get those numbers out to you. We do a daily count of these pollen in the air. This is a typical slide. This is from today's reading, and it's showing here a cluster of willow tree pollen. The color of pollen is normally colorless. This is the color of the stain we use, that's taken by the pollen only. So if you see a lot of other stuff, including some starch particles, some occasional molds, and I'll try to show you some mold in the next few minutes here. So I'm gonna move over the microscope, and just to show you at the lower power magnification. That's the same one we were looking at with the willow trees in the middle, just moving a little bit. I want to show you this one here, and this has certain characteristic that certainly fits with a hickory tree pollen. So you see down at the bottom here, some of these smaller ones, they're like cylinders, brownish. These are the some of the molds, like a cladosporium. You can see a couple of them there. I'm going to go down to the low power again. And again, you see a lot of particulate matter. Many of this is starch particles from degraded plant materials. Some of it is also pollutants in the air. Let's see what we have. That's probably another hickory down there. Yep, that is also typical of hickory. I must say, I wasn't expecting to see it till later in the season, but it's certainly out there. Let's see. I'll try to do this without making you too dizzy. There might be some delay in the way the slide moves and the picture comes up. I'm trying to see a cluster of some of the cottonwood pollen. I think these might look like I get. Yeah, certainly those are cottonwoods. They have certain characteristics that can tell them apart. That brown one is again a mold. It's probably what they call a basidiospore. Some of these also like tube structures that are brownish. These are mold as well. Mold does not take the pinkish purplish state that we use. So these are the Leptosphaeria type. And there's a very popular mold, then brown there in the middle, that's the Alternaria. We haven't seen much Alternaria yet this year, but generally more when there's higher humidity, and especially so when we start seeing leaves falling on the ground. It's commonly linked to asthma many times. Let's see. Again, more cottonwood. This is also a different kind of cottonwood. Sometimes you see variations in the way the pollen appears. This is a very nice petula type, which are typically like birch and hornbeam, and sometimes hazelnut, but this is not hazelnut. Could be hackberry. Let's see what else we have. I'm gonna go down to the low power again, and there's a nice group there. And these some of the petula with the darker red, and then the others are all cottonwood. We see a lot of cottonwood still. 2 days ago we had a massive amount of cottonwood that just came out of nowhere, and again, but does take some time, probably an hour a day to count these. Of course, the more there is, the longer it takes. This is, I think, it might be sycamore. Still more cottonwood. Yeah, this one has certainly very likely sycamore-like. So of course, when there is rain, you see these blank areas without much pollen in them. But certainly, as soon as it dry out, those pollen are flying again. So, the other thing I did was, let me take a quick look at if there's any comments. Might be some delay. Seems like we're up on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and they look like, I'm not sure the Twitter is actually live. Let's see, go live. I think it might be. I might have forgot to push a button there. Oh, all right. There's a lot of technical parts for this. Right. I'm sorry if I missed some of your comments, but I will definitely look through them and try to answer you back at some point. All right. So this is the next thing I want to talk about, and as you can see, there is a graph of the pollen counts starting in early April. We had a short peak here when we had temperature going up to the 70s, but it kind of stayed low until recently. We're seeing this pick up at the end. This is this year, so this is a big discrepancy from last year, and you can see much higher counts started early in April. We've had much higher peaks as well. So overall, this season has been milder or later start, but I think we're certainly starting to see a drastic pickup in the last few days. Again, going down to 2016 was still kind of average, but definitely still higher than this year. 2015 had some similar pattern to with the blue line here, and as you can see, it tends to pick up later. So we've seen this kind of before. As 2014 had very large peaks, so most plants produce those pollens at the same time, and you ended up with very large peaks, and that ended up being much lower towards the end of the season. So my expectations based on these patterns that most likely we're gonna see some peaks later, as these plants are yet to produce the usual amount of pollen. So the next thing I want to talk about is another way for you to get those reports on a daily basis. And this is through our Allergy Pollen Count app that you can get at either the iTunes App Store or on Google Play. And I just wanted to go over some of the features and what you would get with them. This is the home page. One thing for this app to work, it needs to know your location. So it will ask you for permission the first time you start it. And again, the purpose of that is to give you the latest pollen count from the closest National Allergy Bureau stations. We are part of those stations. We are one of 2 stations in Ohio. But there are 80 stations nationwide. So if you are in California, if you are in Texas, based on your location, you're gonna see the 2 nearest locations to you. Now, some stations do not count every day. Some of them do not count on the weekend, but it's still gonna give you the most recent count. And again, this is the home screen. You see the top part, the first station. This is the second station. It also pulls the ozone and dust particles level. Those come from the EPA directly. So I'm not the one counting them, but I thought many people would be interested in having that as well. The other part on the home page is just your weather, and again kind of a small forecast for the next coming day. And certainly have some warmer weather today. We could expect to continue to see fairly high pollen count, and with the high humidity at 46, tomorrow 58, that also bodes well for having continued mold counts as well. We might get some reprieve with the rain, but usually that's just limited to the time when it's raining. Looks like we'll have some very nice weather coming on Monday and Tuesday. The other part in the app is the STAP videos. This is my plan is to get this more useful in a way by having separate channels as well. Mostly these come from our YouTube channel, but the nice thing is you'll have ability to search through them and find topics that might be of relevant to you. And all of this is of course limited to allergies. The second tab on this page shows you our Facebook feed. So this is a nice area for you to see what the counts were the previous day. You might also see sometimes some of the other pictures that I usually include at times. If you are logged in under your own Facebook, again, it'll be just feels like you're in Facebook. The third tab is our Twitter, and we will show within it anybody who has used our hand, which is at Allergy Clinic OH for Allergy Clinic Ohio. So at Allergy Clinic OH. So you'll have that functionality as well. The other part, which you don't have a tab for, is you'll get an alert notification for the latest pollen count that I post. This is the one, for instance, that I placed this morning. So this will pop up as a notification when it's posted. Of course, if it only pertains to our area, so if you're in other locations where this may not be relevant to you, if you always have the option to turn those notifications off. Similarly, this screen pertains mostly to our patients, where they can turn on specific alerts for the office of our practice that they need to receive alerts from, and they use that also for allergy check-in. This tab, which shows hours, also lists our offices, but also includes our shot hours that are updated live based on if there's any special closures or other things. Again, not for everybody if they are not part of our area or our practice. But the key thing is this home page will work for anybody within the United States, and I hope some people will find that useful as well. So this is kind of what I had planned on for the first production. There's a lot of technical things behind the scene that I know I need to work on, but again, leave your comments. Tell me what else you like to discuss. I hope also to expand on this in the future to include other topics that relates to allergy, and share the information, and be able to help answer some of those concerns. I wish you all a very wonderful weekend, and hope to see you again in our upcoming broadcast as well. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.